The desert of Varn 7 stretched beneath a sky bruised purple with twin suns, its dunes shifting like the breath of a sleeping god, each grain of sand humming with the residual energy of 1,000 plasma bolts. Smoke curled from the wreckage of armored skimmers and shattered drone nests, their metallic bones half buried in the ochre waste, while the air tasted of ozone and burnt spice, the scent of war made personal. Amid the chaos, Kale of the 7th Guard moved like a shadow carved from silence. His armor cracked but still intact, his breath steady despite the weight of the plasma rifle slung across his back and the blood drying in the creases of his knuckles. He was not a hero by title nor by birth. He was a man from a forgotten colony world, conscripted into the Terran Frontier Corps because his planet had no voice and no vote. But when the Empress of the Luminari, Vera the Unbroken, fell beneath the weight of a collapsing obsidian spire during the Battle of the Shattered Dunes, it was Kale who lunged, who threw himself between her and the falling stone, who took the full impact on his shoulder and ribs, who dragged her limp, glowing form into the lee of a shattered artillery turret as the enemy's clawed infantry closed in. She was white as moonlight on frozen glass, her hair a cascade of liquid silver that shimmered even in the dying light, her eyes the color of a storm caught mid-crack. Violet, furious, alive. She did not scream. She did not beg. She simply looked up at him, her fingers curling weakly against his armored chest, and whispered something in a language that made the air itself tremble. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the weight behind them. And when the first of the enemy's biomechanical warriors lunged from the smoke, Kale did not hesitate. He fired. He reloaded. He kicked. He broke skulls with the butt of his rifle. He used the fallen enemy's own plasma lance like a club. He fought not for glory, not for promotion, not even for survival. He fought because the woman beneath him, the Empress of 1,000 star systems, had stopped breathing for 3 full seconds, and in that silence, something inside him cracked open like a star going nova. He would not let her die on a desert no one on Earth had ever heard of. The battle raged for hours beyond reason. The Luminari, though wounded and scattered, rallied around their fallen sovereign, their crystalline armor catching the light of the dying suns and turning the battlefield into a cathedral of glimmering steel. Kale, bleeding from 3 gashes along his left side, stood between Vera and the last wave of the Zarthal warclans. Towering, chitinous beasts with 6 limbs and mouths lined with rotating teeth that sang when they screamed. He had no squad left, no comms, no hope, just the weight of the Empress in his arms, her pulse now a slow, steady thrum against his chest, and the knowledge that if he fell, the Empire would collapse, and with it, 1,000 worlds would burn in the chaos of succession. He did not know her name beyond what the soldiers whispered, Vera, the last light of the celestial throne. He did not know she had once danced in gardens of floating petals while her courtiers played harps made from the bones of extinct whales. He did not know she had wept when her first child, a daughter with eyes like twin nebulas, died in a plague that swept through the orbital spires. He only knew that she was warm, that she smelled like crushed moonmint and static, that when he had pulled her from the rubble, her silver hair had tangled in his fingers, and for a moment, he forgot he was a soldier. He remembered being a boy watching fireflies in the fields back home, thinking they were stars fallen too far. Now he was the last star between her and oblivion. The Zarthal warlord, a hulking thing named Grathok the Bone Singer, stepped forward, his armor fused from the skulls of fallen emperors, his voice a grinding echo that shook the sand beneath their feet. "The Luminari which is dead," he roared, his mandibles clicking in triumph. "Her blood will feed our gods." Kale did not answer. He simply raised his rifle, its barrel glowing red-hot from overuse, and fired one last shot. Not at Grathok, but at the unstable geothermal vent beneath the warlord's feet. The ground erupted. Molten rock and superheated gas shot skyward, engulfing the warlord in a geyser of fire and stone. The Zarthal screamed, a sound that tore through the desert like a dying star, and then silence. The remaining warriors faltered. They had seen their god fall. They had seen their invincible warlord turn to ash. And now they saw the human, small, broken, bleeding, still standing, still holding the Empress, still looking at them as if daring them to come closer. One of them raised a weapon, Another lowered his head. The third, a young warrior with eyes like cracked amethyst, dropped to one knee and pressed his forehead to the sand. The others followed, not in surrender, in awe, in reverence. For in that moment Kale was not a man. He was the embodiment of a truth the Luminari had forgotten. That love, raw and uncalculated, could outshine even the brightest star. Vera awoke 3 hours later in a healing chamber suspended above the ruins of the battlefield. Her body wrapped in bioluminescent silk that pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The air was cool, scented with the incense of moonbloom lilies, and the ceiling above her was a dome of transparent alloy, showing the twin suns now setting in perfect harmony, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold. She did not open her eyes immediately. She listened. She heard the soft clink of armor being cleaned, the low hum of a medical drone, the distant echo of Luminari hymns sung in low, trembling voices. And then the quiet footsteps, heavy, unfamiliar, human. She opened her eyes slowly, and there he was, Kale, still in his cracked armor, still with the bloodstains on his tunic, his hair matted with sweat and dust, his face hollow with exhaustion. He was sitting on a low bench beside her, his head bowed, his fingers loosely clasped, his breath slow and even. He had not changed. He had not washed. He had not left. He had sat there, hour after hour, while the healers worked, while the courtiers whispered, while the empire held its breath. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the scar on his shoulder, the one shaped like a crescent moon, where the spire had crushed him. He flinched, startled, then looked up. His eyes were tired, but clear. No fear, no ambition, no awe, just quiet, stubborn humanity. "You saved me," she said, her voice softer than wind through glass chimes. He nodded. "You were going to die." She smiled. A small, rare thing, like the first bloom after a decade-long winter. "I know." She sat up slowly, the silk slipping from her shoulders, revealing the intricate silver tattoos that spiraled across her chest. Ancient runes of protection, now glowing faintly blue. "I am Vera, Empress of the Luminari, daughter of the twin moons, keeper of the star weave. I have commanded fleets that turned nebulae to dust. I have outlived 5 kings, 3 prophets, and a rebellion that nearly broke my throne." She leaned forward, her silver hair falling like a curtain around them. "And you are Kale, a guard from a world so small, it does not appear on any star chart. You do not know my name. You do not know my lineage. You do not know the price of my favor." She paused, her violet eyes locking onto his. "But you stood, when all others fled, when all others died. You stood." He swallowed. "I didn't think. That," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated in his bones, "is why I will never let you go." The courtiers were horrified. The high priests of the Celestial Veil called it sacrilege. The War Council demanded his execution for violating the purity of the royal bloodline. Even the healers, who had stitched his wounds and cleared his lungs of toxic dust, looked at him with a mixture of pity and fear. But Vera did not listen. She did not speak to them. She did not even look at them. Instead, she ordered the throne room stripped of its marble and gold, replaced with the rough-hewn stone of her childhood homeworld, the scent of desert wind and night-blooming cactus filling the air. She had Kale brought before her, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as a guest. He wore clean clothes for the first time in weeks, simple linen, woven by the hands of Luminari artisans who had never touched human fabric before. He felt like a child in a borrowed suit. She sat upon a low dais, barefoot, her silver hair unbound, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light. She poured him tea from a cup carved from a single pearl, its steam rising in spirals that formed fleeting shapes, birds, ships, faces. "You do not drink this," she said. "It is sacred. Only the royal family and those who have saved the empire may sip from it." He stared at it. "I'm not royal." "You are now," she replied. "The laws of the Luminari are written in starlight, not stone. When a soul chooses to die for another, that soul becomes part of the empire's soul. You are not my guard anymore, Kale. You are my heart's echo. He didn't know what to say, so he drank. The tea was warm, sweet, and tasted like rain on a desert flower, a flavor he had never known, yet somehow remembered. He felt tears in his eyes. He did not wipe them away. She saw. She reached out and brushed his cheek with her thumb. You weep, she said. Why? I don't know, he whispered. I've never been wanted like this. She leaned forward, her forehead touching his. Then let me teach you. The days that followed were a storm of quiet revolutions. Vera refused to return to the capital. She declared the desert her new court. She ordered the construction of a palace from salvaged war machines, a fortress of broken hulls and fused plasma cores, its walls alive with glowing vines that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She had Kale walk beside her each morning as she inspected the wounded, spoke to the children of fallen soldiers, and taught the Luminari children to read the stars not as maps, but as stories. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane, when he tried to teach them how to play catch with a rubber ball, only to have one of the children accidentally launch it into orbit with a flick of their psychic energy. She danced with him beneath the twin moons, her bare feet leaving glowing footprints in the sand, her silver hair swirling like liquid mercury around them as the desert wind carried the scent of spice and something older, something sacred. He learned her favorite song, a lullaby her mother sang to her before the plague took her. She learned his, a tune his grandmother hummed while kneading bread, a melody so simple it made her cry. She asked him why he joined the military. He said, because no one else would. She asked him what he wanted. He said, to be somewhere where I'm not afraid. She kissed him then, not gently, not ceremoniously, but fiercely, like a storm claiming its sky. And when she pulled away, her eyes were wet. You are not afraid anymore, she said, because I am here. But the Empire did not forget. The High Council convened in the crystal spire of Varn 9, where the walls whispered secrets and the floor reflected the sins of kings. They sent envoys. They sent threats. They sent assassins. 3 times, men in black cloaks slipped through the palace's defenses, blades tipped with neurotoxin, aiming for Kale's throat as he slept. Each time Vera was waiting. Each time she did not scream. She did not call for guards. She simply raised her hand, and the assassins froze, their bodies turning to glass, then shattering into 1,000 glittering fragments that rained down like cursed snow. The 4th assassin was a former Luminari general, a man who had served her father. He knelt before her, weeping. Empress, forgive me. I only seek to preserve the purity of the throne. She looked at him, her violet eyes cold as the void between galaxies. You speak of purity, she said. While your hands are stained with the blood of children who died so you could keep your power, you speak of legacy. While you would kill the only soul who ever made me feel alive. She stepped closer. Tell your masters this. Hurt him once, and I burn worlds. Hurt him twice, and I unravel the stars that gave them light. Hurt him again, and I will become the silence that follows the end of all things. The general wept harder. He kissed her boots. He left, and that night, Vera sat beside Kale as he stared at the stars. They will come again, he said. I know, she replied, but they will come knowing you are not mine to lose. He turned to her. Why me? She smiled. Because you didn't ask for anything. He frowned. That's not a reason. It's the only one that matters, she whispered. I have spent my life surrounded by those who wanted power, or wealth, or titles. You wanted only to be seen. And when you saw me broken, you did not see an empress. You saw a woman. And that is the rarest thing in the universe. The weeks turned to months. The palace grew. Gardens of luminescent moss spread across the dunes. Children of mixed blood, half human, half Luminari, ran barefoot through the corridors, their laughter echoing like bells. Kale learned to speak Luminari, not just in words, but in the silences between them. He learned how to read the patterns in her hair when she was angry, how the glow of her tattoos deepened when she dreamed, how she hummed when she was happy. He taught her how to make coffee. A bitter, dark brew that made her nose wrinkle and her eyes water, but that she drank every morning, claiming it tasted like rebellion. He taught her how to laugh at bad jokes. She taught him how to touch the stars without fear. One night, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and the desert turned to liquid silver, she led him to the highest spire of the palace, a tower built from the fused hull of a Zarthul dreadnought. She took his hand. "There is a ritual," she said. "Only the Empress may perform it. It is called the binding of souls. It binds two hearts across lifetimes, across galaxies, across death itself." He looked at her. "What happens if I say no?" She smiled. "Then I will keep you anyway." He laughed, a real, full, unguarded laugh, and she kissed him again, deeper this time, as if she were trying to imprint his soul onto hers. She whispered the words in the old tongue, her voice rising like a song carved from the wind. The sky above them shimmered. Stars blinked out, then reappeared, not as they were, but as they would be, woven together in a pattern only lovers could see. Two hearts, one flame, one man, one empress, one promise unbreakable. When it ended, she pressed her forehead to his. "You are mine," she said, "and I am yours." He held her tighter. "I don't know how to be someone's everything," he whispered. "Then let me show you," she replied. The council sent their final gambit. Not an army, not a weapon, not a threat. They sent her daughter. Leora was 17 standard years old. A girl with silver hair like her mother's, but eyes like molten copper, fierce and bright. She had been raised in the capital, shielded from the chaos of the desert, taught that her mother had lost her mind, that the human was a parasite, a stain upon the Luminari bloodline. She arrived in a ship of pure white crystal, her robes stitched with the sigils of the old order, her expression cold as a frozen moon. She did not bow. She did not speak. She simply stood before Kale as he repaired a broken solar panel, her hands folded behind her back, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. "They say you saved her," she said. "I say you stole her." He wiped his hands on a rag. "I didn't steal anything. You made her weak," Leora hissed. "She speaks of you like you're a god. She forgets her duty. She forgets her people. She forgets the stars." He looked at her, really looked, saw the fear beneath the anger, saw the loneliness, saw the girl who had never been held. "You miss her," he said. She stiffened. "I do not." "You do," he said softly. "You miss the way she used to sing to you when you were small, the way she smelled like rain and starlight, the way she held you when you cried because the other children called you the half-breed." Her breath caught, her eyes filled. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen her cry," he said. "And I've seen her smile. And I've seen the way she looks at you in the old holos. She loves you more than she loves the throne." Leora looked away. "She's broken." "No," he said. "She's alive. And if you ever want to know what that feels like, come find me." He turned back to the panel. And for the first time in years, Leora did not leave. She stood there, watching, listening, until the sun set. And then she left. But she came back the next day. And the next. She began to ask questions. About Earth. About his home. About the taste of rain. About the way humans held hands. About whether he ever felt afraid. He told her stories. Not of battles or glory, but of his grandmother's garden, of the time he got lost in a snowstorm and slept under a bridge, of the dog he had as a boy who followed him everywhere, even into the schoolyard, even when the other boys threw rocks. She listened. She didn't laugh. But she didn't walk away. One evening, she brought him a gift. A small pendant carved from a fragment of her mother's old crown, shaped like a star with two hearts entwined at its center. "She gave me this," Leora said quietly, "when I was 5. She said it was for the one who would make her whole." She looked at him. I didn't believe her. He took it, held it, felt the warmth of it against his palm. She was right. Leora turned to leave, then stopped. "I hate you." He nodded. "I know. But," she whispered, "I don't want you to die." He smiled. "I won't." She left. But the next morning, she was there again. And the next. And the next. The council sent the final decree. A tribunal. A trial. A sentence. Kale was to be exiled. Vera was to be confined to the capital. Leora was to be crowned in her place. The order was signed in blood and sealed with the ancient sigil of the first Empress. The message arrived at dawn. Vera read it. She did not scream. She did not cry. She walked to the central chamber of the palace, where Kale was teaching a group of children how to make a fire without matches. She stood at the doorway, silent, still. Then, slowly, she raised her hand. The sky above them darkened, not with clouds, not with storm, but with the absence of light. The twin suns vanished. The stars winked out, one by one. The desert went black. The luminari fell to their knees, crying out in terror. The stars were gone. And then, from the heavens, came a voice. Not loud, not angry, but clear as a bell in a silent room. I am Vera, daughter of the twin moons, Empress of the luminari. And if you take him from me, I will extinguish every star that ever gave you light. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, from the capital, from the spires of the old empire, from the ships of the High Council, came a single, trembling response. Not in words, but in silence. The stars returned, one by one, brighter than before, and the decree was revoked. That night, Vera stood on the balcony, her silver hair flowing like a river of moonlight, her gown woven from the threads of 1,000 dying stars. Kale stood beside her, his hand in hers. You did that, he said. You erased the stars. I did, she replied. I could have burned their worlds. I could have drowned their cities in fire. I could have turned their children to ash. She turned to him. But I didn't. He looked at her. Why? She smiled, the smile of a woman who had finally found her home. Because I love you. He pulled her close. I love you too. She rested her head against his chest. I want you to be the father of my children. He froze. What? I want our children to have your courage, she whispered. Your kindness, your stubbornness, your terrible sense of humor, and my light, my strength, my stars. He looked at her, his eyes wide. You're serious. I've never been more serious, she said. I have lived for 3 centuries. I have ruled empires. I have outlived lovers, wars, and gods. But I have never loved. Until you. He swallowed. I'm not worthy. Worthy. She laughed, soft and bright. You are the only thing I've ever been worthy of. He kissed her then, slow, deep, tender. As the twin suns rose again, painting the desert in gold and rose, as the children below began to sing the old song, as Leora watched from the doorway, her hand resting on her heart, her eyes wet with something new, not hatred, not fear, but hope. And so, beneath the light of 1,000 restored stars, Kale of the 7th Guard, the man who had once been nothing, became the father of the next luminary dynasty. He did not wear a crown. He did not sit on a throne. But when the first child was born, a girl with silver hair and copper eyes, her skin glowing faintly with the warmth of both worlds, it was Kale who held her first. And when Vera, weak but radiant, looked at him through tear-filled eyes, she whispered the ancient vow one last time. Not as a command, not as a threat, but as a promise, as a prayer, as a lullaby. Hurt him once, she said, and I burn worlds. He kissed her forehead. Then don't ever let go. And she didn't. The wedding was not held in the crystal spire, nor in the hall of 1,000 thrones, nor beneath the gilded domes of the capital where the old council still whispered in shadows. It was held on the dunes where Kale had first carried Vera from the rubble, where the sand still shimmered with the ghost of plasma burns, and the wind still carried the scent of moonbloom lilies. The luminari came, not in armor or ceremonial robes, but in simple tunics of woven starlight, their silver hair braided with flowers that glowed faintly as they walked. Children ran ahead, scattering petals that turned to sparks when they touched the ground. Leora stood at the edge of the circle, her copper eyes bright, her hand resting on the head of her little brother, a boy with Kale's dark curls and Vera's violet gaze, already whispering to the sand as if it could answer. Kale wore a tunic of soft, undyed linen, stitched with threads of silver that shifted color with the light, like the desert at dawn. He had no sword, no rank, no insignia, only the pendant Leora had given him, now worn around his neck, warm against his skin. Vera wore no crown. Instead, her hair flowed free, woven with strands of living vine that curled like tendrils of starlight, blooming with tiny white flowers that opened and closed with her breath. She walked barefoot, each step leaving behind a faint, glowing imprint that faded slowly, as if the earth itself remembered her joy. No priest spoke. No decree was read. Instead, Kale placed his hand over her heart, and she placed hers over his. And together, they spoke the words, not in Luminari, not in Terran, but in the quiet language they had built between them. The silence after laughter, the warmth of shared tea, the way she hummed when she slept, the way he held her when the stars felt too far. "I choose you," he said. "I choose you," she answered. And the desert sighed. The twin suns paused, as if holding their breath. Then, as one, the stars above them flared, not with fire, but with light, 1,000 points of silver and gold weaving together into a single, radiant constellation. Two hearts, entwined, crowned by a child's hand reaching for the sky. The celebration lasted 3 days. There were no speeches, no feasts of exotic meats or rare wines. Instead, there was music, luminary harps played by children, human flutes made from hollowed bone, the rhythmic clapping of palms against sand. There were stories. Kale told of his grandmother's bread, and how she used to say the secret ingredient was patience. Vera told of the time she tried to ride a sky whale as a girl and ended up stuck in its ear for 3 hours, singing lullabies until it sneezed her out. The children laughed until they cried. The elders wept quietly, not from sorrow, but because they had forgotten how joy could feel like sunlight after a century of storms. By the 4th morning, the desert was quiet again. The guests had gone. The palace, now called the Hollow Star, stood not as a fortress, but as a home, its walls alive with vines that bloomed in the shape of hands, its floors warm underfoot, its windows open to the wind. Kale sat on the balcony, sipping coffee, still bitter, still terrible, still his favorite, while Vera slept beside him, curled like a cat in the sunlight, her silver hair fanned across the pillow like a fallen galaxy. Their daughter, Alira, slept in a cradle of woven light beside them, her tiny fingers curled around a single moonbloom petal. Their son, Torin, sat cross-legged on the floor, trying to make a toy ship fly using only his mind. It wobbled, then soared, then crashed into a potted cactus. He grinned. Vera opened her eyes. "He's going to be a disaster," she murmured. "Just like his mother," Kale replied. She smiled, slow and deep, and reached for his hand. "I'd have it no other way." Years passed. They did not rule an empire from a throne. They ruled from the quiet. They taught children, luminari, human, and those born between, to read the stars not as maps, but as stories. They healed wounds, not just of flesh, but of memory. They welcomed refugees from broken worlds, gave them shelter, gave them names, gave them belonging. Kale built a school where children learned to grow food in the desert, to fix broken machines with their hands, to sing songs from 100 worlds. Vera taught them how to listen, to the wind, to the silence between heartbeats, to the voice inside that says, "You are not alone." The council never came again, not because they were afraid, but because they had seen what happened when a human and an empress chose love over power. They had watched as the stars, once dimmed by fear, now burned brighter than ever, not because of conquest, but because of care. And so, they left them be. In time, the children grew. Alira became a healer, her touch so gentle it could mend shattered minds. Torin became a poet, writing verses that made grown luminari weep, verses about a man who stood in the dust and became a king without a crown. They married. They had children of their own. And every year, on the anniversary of the wedding, the whole family gathered on the dunes beneath the twin suns. They lit lanterns made of woven light and sent them floating into the sky, each one carrying a wish, not for power, not for wealth, but for peace. For laughter. For coffee that was still too bitter. For someone to hold you when the stars felt too far. Cale grew older. His hair turned gray, his steps slower, his hands rougher with time. But his eyes never lost their quiet light. Vera, though her skin still glowed with celestial radiance, began to fade, not in beauty, but in presence. The stars whispered it to her in dreams. Her time was not endless. She was not immortal. She was mortal now, because she had chosen love, and love, true love, always carries the weight of endings. One evening, as the suns dipped low and the desert turned to liquid amber, she lay in his arms on the balcony, her head on his chest, her fingers curled around his. The children and grandchildren slept inside. The wind hummed the old song. "I'm tired," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "Then rest. I don't want to leave you." "You won't," he said. "Not really." She looked up at him, her violet eyes dimming like distant stars. "Will you remember me?" He smiled, slow and sure. "I'll remember the way you laughed when you burned the first pot of coffee. I'll remember the way you danced in the rain even when you had no body to get wet. I'll remember how you cried when you saw your first snowfall, even though you'd never seen one. I'll remember how you held my hand when you thought I wasn't looking. I'll remember all of it, every second, every breath, every star you ever made." She closed her eyes. "Promise." He pressed his lips to hers, soft as dawn. "I promise." She slept, and when the first light of dawn touched the dunes, she was gone. There was no funeral, no mourning. Because the luminari do not bury their dead, they return them to the sky. That morning the children gathered on the dunes. They did not cry, they sang. And as the twin suns rose, the air above them shimmered, not with heat, but with light. 1,000 silver threads spiraled upward, rising like smoke, like breath, like a sigh given form. They wove together, twisting into the shape of a woman, her silver hair flowing, her eyes glowing, her smile wide and bright as a newborn star. And then, slowly, she became part of the heavens. The next night, when the children looked up, they saw her, not as a constellation, not as a legend, but as a presence, a gentle glow in the space between two stars, a whisper in the wind, a warmth in the dark. Cale sat on the balcony, holding the pendant she had given him, now fused with his skin, glowing faintly with her pulse. He didn't weep. He smiled, because he knew she was still singing. Years passed. Cale lived to be 97. He never remarried, never left the desert. He raised his grandchildren, taught his great-grandchildren how to make coffee, how to fix broken things, how to laugh when the world felt heavy. He planted trees where none could grow. He wrote letters to children on distant worlds, telling them stories of a woman who loved a man who didn't know he was worthy. On the day he died, he was sitting in his chair, wrapped in a blanket woven from starlight, his hand resting on the pendant, his eyes closed. His last words, whispered to the wind, were, "I'm coming, love." And when his breath left him, the sky above the hollow star blazed, not with fire, but with light. A single brilliant star appeared, glowing just beside the one they had always called Vera's light. And the next morning, the children woke to find 2 new flowers blooming on the balcony. White petals, silver veins, glowing softly. They called them Cale's hope. The empire did not fall. It grew, not in power, not in conquest, but in kindness. Children from 100 worlds came to the desert, not to seek a queen, but to learn what love looked like when it didn't demand a crown. They built schools, gardens, libraries, homes, and every night, when the twin suns set and the stars came out, the people of the hollow star would gather on the dunes, hold hands and look up, and there, in the quiet between the stars, they would see them. 2 lights, side by side, always, 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 and they would smile, because love, when it's real, doesn't end. It just becomes part of the sky.